We are down to 3 teams in the high school football playoffs, and we're also down to 1 microphone for this Temple Daily Telegram Sports Podcast. This is Josh with Marcus, Greg, and Daniel. Welcome back, everybody. We had 4 teams last week in the third round. 3 remain: Temple, Salado, and Rockdale. We're going to talk about their matchups. Got some good ones. Now, if you want to call it, this fourth round, the state quarterfinals or the regional final, that's up to you. It's the fourth round either way. Temple is playing number 2 Manville at Prairie View A&M.
Be careful tomorrow.
Yeah. Salado is going to have its hands full against number 2 West Orange Stark. That game is in Katy at a very expensive stadium. And Rockdale is playing Teague up in Waco at Waco ISD Stadium. I'm not sure how much it costs to build that one, but it's still pretty nice. It's been there a while, too.
There's been a lot of use out of it, whatever it costs.
Yeah. It's very, very nice hosts up there. But let's get this thing started. I'm going to toss it over to Greg. Big rematch between Temple and Manville. You're logging a lot of miles over there to Prairie View A&M as well. Back-to-back weeks,
Yeah.
The Wildcats were down there. But this one's shaping up to be another good one, and I'm just happy that it's starting at 7:30 and not 10:30 or whatever it was last year.
Yeah, that's right. I know you had to pull a late office shift on that one, waiting for me to finally get my story in, or 2 versions of the story.
Yes.
I believe that was. I probably still owe you something from doing that. But anyway, that was the 4th game of a quadruple header at AT&T Stadium, Jerry World, up there in Arlington, and luckily this one is a single header. It's Temple Manville, 10-3 Temple against 12-0 second-ranked Manville, and it shapes up a lot like last year. I mean, really, you've got just a Manville team that has steamrolled people pretty much all year and just has a ton of talent. I mean, I count at least 8 FBS scholarship commitments and a lot of underclassmen also who got major offers. So they're about as talented of a high school team, I think, as you'll see, especially 5A and under, just a lot of talent. Three different guys committed to Texas A&M, 1 to Penn State, 1 to Missouri, wow. Navy, Texas State, quarterbacks going to North Texas. So it's a lot of talent, but
pretty decent.
They're pretty decent. I talked to their coach, and he said their field house this week is kind of like Grand Central Station as far as recruiters coming through there. He said there's always recruiters there talking to him, and it's
what a shame.
It's a tough problem to have, but Temple has its share of athletes too. I think sometimes people throw the underdog label on Temple. They have their share of talent, so it might not be 8 Division I commitments, but it might be 8 or 10 guys off this team that go play college football. So
and I mean, 4th year in a row they're in the 4th round, right? So scholarships are not. I mean,
no,
the athletes are there.
Yeah, no, you're looking at this pretty impressive. Now that we know Temple is going back up to Class 6A, for the next couple of seasons, we can kind of put a cap on this 4-year run, and it comes out to 59 games for Temple. This will be their 59th game in 4 years, their 20th playoff game, and their 10th in the last 2 years. So pretty impressive what Temple has done. Temple was pretty fortunate last week to be able to come back in the final minute, and they gave up the lead to Port Arthur Memorial. That was another rematch, revenge game, whatever you want to call it. And
sure.
Memorial played a whole lot better than they did last year, and took the lead with I think 54 seconds left. And Temple had a nice kickoff return, a nice long pass to Xavier Johnson, and Zion Leach scores the game-winning touchdown with I think 22 seconds left. So very dramatic, nice comeback for Temple. Manville has its wish here. I think they've wanted another shot at Temple pretty much for 365 days.
Yeah.
Now they got it. I think it shapes up the same. I think on paper you might favor Manville just because of all that talent and scholarship guys that we talked about. Quarterbacks back. They've got a running back rotation of 3 guys who are all really good. They've got like 4 wide receivers. Jalen Preston is an amazing talent who's going to Texas A&M. So, and then a really good defense that gives up, I think 12 points a game.
Wow.
So, all that said, you could have made all the same arguments last year about why Manville should have been favored and Temple won the game.
Right.
And I think some people might have thought like Temple must have played a perfect game last year to be able to do it. Not really the case. I mean, they threw 2 interceptions. They missed an extra point. They didn't rush for very much. So, But, they just came up with enough plays. Deontay Hextall made a great catch in traffic for the game-winning touchdown, and then the defense came up with a stand late. So, it's almost eerie how similar this game shapes up. The only difference, I think, is if Manville overlooked Temple last year, now they know what Temple's about. They've been on the field with them, so that I don't think they're going to overlook them, but we'll just see how this year's game goes. It should be – I think if Temple wins, I think it'll be close. I think Manville has the potential to win the game semi-comfortably if Temple can't hang, but I think it's going to be another close one. I give Temple a pretty decent shot to win it, even though Manville, if they had a point spread on it, they'd probably be like a 7 or 10 point favorite, maybe more.
Yeah, they're definitely not going to overlook Temple again this year, but there's always that little hint of doubt in the back of Manville's mind, maybe seeing how Temple kind of stunned them last year, and I don't know if that does anything this year, but it's got to be there.
Right, and I'll say one thing on Manville's side. I talked to their coach yesterday. Tough guy to get a hold of because he's dealing with all those recruiters, but very complimentary of Temple. He's saying this is not about revenge. I mean, you can, believe him if you want to. He said, of course, our kids want another shot at Temple, but we haven't talked revenge. I saw some video of their players being interviewed, very respectful of Temple. They know what they're up against. So, and it's, the Temple kid said last week was a huge trash-talking game, primarily coming from Port Arthur Memorial. They said Manville doesn't really do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think once you get to this point, there's definitely some respect between the different opponents at this level.
Especially when you run into the same guys again, which Temple, if you read the story, they've run into the same teams quite a bit here during this 4-year run. But, I think it's going to be a great game, and maybe advantage Temple having played at this same stadium last week, a little more comfortable. Probably won't bother Manville, but anytime you get to go back to a place, I think that gives you something of an advantage.
I don't think there's going to be any more snow falling anywhere in the area around again, but it's going to be cold, which will be fun.
Maybe we can take a poll here, like who's got the better sort of catchphrase, blue front, white back, or Hoka Hey?
It's probably going to go 50-50 if you ask the people at the stadium. I don't think there's any neutral.
No.
Here, I don't know.
The Hoka Hey thing is pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's
with
not bad.
General Custer and Last Stand and all that, but I don't know how applicable that is to Texas high school football in 2017.
Well, Manville's got this fourth round kind of, I wouldn't say jinx or anything, but I mean this is like they need to get over this.
Nemesis maybe. It doesn't really help when you run into Katy 3 straight years,
right?
And then a Temple team that goes this far now every year it seems. So, Manville's definitely going to have to earn it. I think they've only been to the state semifinals once in school history. Yeah. It's a young school. They've only been playing varsity football 10 years, but they're at this point for the 7th time in 8 years. So they get it done every year, and eventually they just run into someone who knocks them out. But
I was just about to bring up the history because this is just their 10th varsity season, and you talked about what Temple's done over the last 4 years. Manville in their first 2 years missed the playoffs, but they've been in it every year since then, and since 2010 they have, including this year, 98 wins, 13 losses, including a 25-7 record in the playoffs, and that's over since 2010. So obviously this is a team that's poised to be a powerhouse for quite a while. They've built it already in a short time, and it'll be a fun one to watch again, I think.
Yeah, we mentioned Manville only having one state semifinal appearance in program history. That actually is the same over at Rockdale, which has a much longer history.
Right.
But and that came in 1976. And Rockdale's been in the fourth round 3 out of the last 5 seasons, including this one.
Right.
Tonight against Teague. So this fourth round is pretty important for the Tigers as well.
One more tidbit about this game. You've got 2 senior quarterbacks, T.J. Rumfield for Temple, Kason Martin for Manville. He's the coach's son. They're actually both coaches' sons because Toby Rumfield is the baseball coach at Temple. But seniors, pocket passers, tall, lanky guys, 31 touchdown passes each. So and not guys who are looking to run. So I think if you're looking for maybe a key to the game, you could always say turnovers and maybe special teams. But just from the line of scrimmage, it's I think maybe which defensive line can get after the opposing quarterback and get him out of his comfort zone, because these guys are like rhythm throwers. They need some space to operate. If you can kind of get around their legs and make them move, you can force them into some bad stuff. So, yeah, Temple's got a great defensive line, but Manville is the same way. So that's something that bears watching.
Similar quarterbacks, similar style quarterbacks, I guess, in that game. Very different style quarterbacks in Rockdale Teague. Rockdale's Torrey Loughlin's dual threat. He's going to run it. He's going to throw it. I believe the quarterback's name for at Teague is Satterwhite. That's his last name. His first name's Zach. He's more of a kind of a run the offense type guy, spread the ball around to his playmakers. But that game, like we said, is 7:30 tonight at Waco ISD Stadium. Rockdale's 10-3, Teague 11-2. Both have been playing pretty well in these playoffs. Last week, Rockdale shut out West in the second half and overcame a 7-point halftime deficit to win that one. And Coach Jeff Miller is really high on his defense and the way they've been playing over the last few weeks. And he's going to need those guys going up against these Lions who have playmakers on offense, kind of like Rockdale does. These guys, they seem to be very similar as far as speed and athleticism on the offensive side of the ball. So it might come down to which defense is able to contain the most. That sounds cliche, but that actually might be true in this case. And like I said, Rockdale's looking to get over this fourth round hump. I think in the last 5 years, the Tigers have averaged 10 wins, but they've yet to get to the state semifinals since that 1976 season. And we were talking earlier. This seems like this Rockdale team has something a little bit special on their side. There's something about them. Maybe this might be the year. But I don't know what you guys think of what they might need to do to get past Teague.
I mean, it's really they've got all the talent, they've got the weapons. I mean, offense all season long, it's just been quarterback Torrey Loughlin just making things happen, whether it's with his arm or with his feet. I mean, the dude can really do it all, honestly. Then he's also got offensive weapons. He's got Jaquaylin Crawford, who, you just give him a little bit of space and he's gone for 90-plus yards. Tyler Lemkuhl at tight end, he's one of the best in the business. He's got good speed for his size, great hands, so he's a tough cover. And then they've got other guys that are just ready to step up. The team's hungry to get over that 10-win mark that we've been talking about. I think Josh, it was you that said, somebody for them said, the teams, they're hungry. They feel like they want it more than Teague. But at this level, everybody wants it. Everyone's strong. Everyone's got the talent to be here. And sometimes it comes down to, who wants it more. So Teague's going to be a tough challenge, but it's definitely going to be a matchup that, whoever brings it will come away. And, maybe Rockdale does want it more. So maybe they will end up going on to that next round.
I was going to say, I think the difference this week for Rockdale might be probably can't afford to fall behind Teague by a whole bunch. I think they were fortunate to play a really good second half and come back and beat West. They might not have that same luxury against Teague. I covered them against Cameron Yo a few weeks ago, and they seem like a kind of a front-running team. They got off to a quick start in that game, and one thing they do is, even though they have great athletes, they look like a team that wants to control the ball and get 6, 8, 10 yards at a time. And Tavis Coleman is a really good running back.
Yeah.
Size, speed, moves, toughness. So, if you're Rockdale, you want to hang with these guys early, maybe get out to an early lead. But coming back from 10 or 14 down might not be as easy this week as it was against West.
Yeah, Rockdale actually has trailed at halftime in its last two playoff games. 2 weeks ago against Woodville, they were down. And then they only gave up 6 points in the second half of that one. So they've only given up 6 points in the second half of their last two games. So
are you saying they want to just fall behind by a little bit?
I mean, it's worked. However, like you said, that's gonna that's not really a trend you want to keep continuing. You want to make sure you're leading pretty much all the time. I think is the key.
Right. Yeah, that's the main thing that I was going to touch on because, I watched Rockdale and West last week. And after the game, I asked Coach Miller about that, having to play from behind in each of these playoff games. And he's like, it does make you battle-tested, but at the same time, you get to the point in the playoffs where you can't afford to do that anymore because the teams get better. And we're going to see it this week. But, yeah, I mean, I think Greg, you hit it right on it. I mean, this team, Rockdale, it won't matter too much if they're just behind by a touchdown or something at halftime, but they can't be down by more than maybe one score against the Teague team. But this is a team that knows how to play in the second half in Rockdale. And, these kids, even if they're behind a little bit, they're not going to get too nervous. They're not going to panic. And for them, it's just a matter of seeing what works because they've got the playmakers. And, last week it was just a matter of waiting for Jaquan Crawford to get open and get the ball to him. And West kind of did a good job shutting him down in the first half. They tried to get it to Lemko, and he unfortunately had one clear drop that could have been a touchdown, and then they just kind of kept him covered, kept two of them bottled up, so other guys were making it work. And that's kind of what Rockdale's done. And then the other thing is really they can't afford to make mistakes. Against West, West only scored their touchdown because Rockdale gave the ball up, and that was just a matter of Lachlan just trying to not want to give up a bad play. And he just really got in some trouble, and they stripped the ball from him for a fumble and gave him good field position.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago against Woodville, it was special teams mistakes. Rockdale gave up 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns, and then last week against West, it was turnovers, and I think they had a blocked punt deep in their zone too. So, Coach Miller has said the last couple weeks that he's waiting for all 3 phases to be on the same page, and they've shown glimpses of that. And tonight would be a great opportunity for them to just click, because we've seen them click, and they're good.
I was wondering if you guys thought, in a game like this where you got 2 good teams, they have athletes, they play good defense, they're pretty good pedigrees. If a guy like Jaquan Crawford couldn't be maybe the difference, because it's a pretty rare talent. He's going to Oklahoma. He kind of does everything well, does it in a lot of different phases. Yeah. Teague has plenty of athletes, but I think he's the only guy who's going to Oklahoma or a similar type program on this field. So it seemed like he could be the difference maker, unless Teague's able to keep him bottled up. But you would think he's good for 1 or 2 big plays, maybe at the right time.
Well, Rockdale's, he might return some kicks. He might line up in the Wildcat. Seen him do that a few times. He'll be a receiver. They're going to find a way to get him the ball, and they're not going to stop him every time. And if they concentrate on him, we've talked about their other guys. So, but one way or the other, he's going to make a difference for sure. And that's, it's going to be a good game. All these games this week are going to be really good. Moving on, West Orange Stark and Salado in Katy. The Mustangs 11-0, the Eagles 12-1. Mustangs, they've won 38 in a row or something like that, but they beat Madisonville by 2 last week to get into this round, and Salado outlasted Belleville 13-10 in overtime in a game that has still kind of stuck with me over the last week. I've never seen 2 slot T teams with good defenses go at it. There was a combined 11 possessions in the entire game, 2 8+ minute drives, 1 for each team. It sounds boring probably, but it was one of the most exciting games I've seen in a long time.
Sports writer's dream too, right?
Oh yeah, and then it ended in 2.5 hours,
even in overtime,
including overtime. Yeah, it started after 8 p.m. and it finished a little bit after 10:30. That's money right there. But Salado, we've talked about them all season. What a season for them. The 12 wins, I think, is second most in program history. They won 13 about 10 years ago. Yeah. But it's been quite a turnaround. This is, as we get deeper, we keep saying it, but this is their toughest task so far. West Orange Stark has proven. I think, Daniel, you're going to be out at that game tonight.
Yeah, I'll be making the trip out to Katy, kind of going back to close to my home roots. But so it's not too much of a difficult task. If you're a Salado Eagle fan, you're just asking your team to go out and snap a team with nearly a 40-game winning streak. So it's definitely a daunting task. The West Orange Stark, they're the back-to-back Class 4A Division II state champion, and then the year before that in 2000, let's see if my math is right, 15, maybe 14, they made it to the state championship. So they've made it to the final round the past 3 years, so this is definitely not new territory for them. And they keep marching into the playoffs. But Salado, that defense, they've really ridden that defense, and it's really hasn't gotten a whole lot of credit. When you talk Salado, you really hear a lot about the 3,000-yard rushers and, Trey Shepard, Cade DePoy, Aaron Torzinski. I mean, those guys, it helps to have a great offensive line, too, and those guys really put up some crazy numbers. Not so much last week because, like you mentioned, when you have two defenses go at it like that.
I'm so familiar with the slot T offenses because both those teams
right,
run that offense.
Right. So, when you got two teams that are so familiar with each other like that, it's hard to put up big numbers and surprise the other one, but they're definitely capable of doing so. But that defense really doesn't get a whole lot of credit. I think for the season, they're averaging just a little over 13 points against. And then here in the playoffs, they've even kind of chipped away at that. They're down to about 11 or 12 here in the playoffs, but it doesn't get much tougher than West Orange Stark. They're ranked number 2 for a reason. You look at their pedigree and you look at their roster, and it's definitely jumps off at the page at you. Since their head coach, let me find it. It's not on the top of my head. And you guys can Cornell Thompson. See, that's why we keep Greg around for those tidbits. But
I'm just echoing Marcus. He said the same thing.
See, the voice of reason over here. But no, since he arrived at West Orange Stark, they've put together, I think, an 89-11 overall record with those 3 state championship appearances. So they're definitely doing a lot of good stuff there. But that defense for West Orange Stark is not to be trifled with. Before giving up the 26 last week, they had given up a field goal in 4 games. So they had 3 straight shutouts, and then they had the field goal, the 3 points. So points are definitely going to be tough to come by. But Salado, Alan Hare, the coach of the Eagles, he pretty much just said, we're preaching the same thing that we preached since the first week of camp back in August. Our toughest opponent every week is ourselves. We don't care if we're facing a winless program or a program that has the pedigree of West Orange Stark. We're going to focus on ourselves. We're going to get better every week, do what we do best, and if it's good enough in the end, fantastic. But if you fall against a program like this and you get to test yourself against a program of this caliber, then that's when you really get to see where you are as a program. Hare, he came to the Eagles a couple years ago. They were kind of down in the dumps, but he's really kind of turned things around there. They're headed in the right direction. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully Salado gets to move on. West Orange Stark, though, you have to imagine even if the Eagles get to move on, West Orange Stark could very likely be the toughest team in their way to the championship. So,
yeah, you mentioned showing progress and things like that. Evidence in last week's win against Belleville. They lost the Bramers or Bramers or however they pronounce it out that way. The last 2 seasons in the playoffs, and they got over that hump.
And I'll just say a couple things. We just talked about Rockdale couldn't afford to get behind to Teague. And this is a Salado team. They really can't afford to get behind because of the type of offense they run. If you're 2 scores down against West Orange Stark, you don't have the type of offense that's going to score quickly twice.
You need the big play to do it.
Right. And that's something that, the slot T works for teams that make it work, and they made it work in Salado, but when you're playing a high-power offense that West Orange Stark's going to bring, you've got to be able to contain them a little bit. And the other thing I wanted to just say, Daniel was talking about what West Orange Stark has done under Cornell Thompson, but, this is a tradition-rich West Orange Stark team. They've only had 1 losing season in their entire history, and that's 1983. And
what happened?
I know, right?
And if they go on a run of state championships right after that?
Yeah,
mid to late 80s.
Yep.
They were a powerhouse. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, I don't even know if Daniel was even born in '83 yet.
It was not. That was not even thought of.
I'm not sure some of these other guys here were, but I know I was. But and yeah, with that 1 losing season, bunch of state titles. This is just a West Orange Stark team that's got a lot of tradition, and Alan Hare's trying to. Did I just say Alan Hare?
That's okay.
Alan Hare in Salado, he's trying to get some tradition back to Salado and get them. So, it'll be fun to watch, and this will definitely be a big test for for Salado and see what they can do against a Mustang team that's just built on tradition, and a Mustang team that last year only gave up 69 points total. This year they've given up 98 points, and
Really
so
slipping there, aren't they, Marcus?
yeah, they're coming off, giving them 98 points, and we'll see if Salado can get them over 100 points given up. Obviously, they'll have to if they want to win.
Yeah, I don't think we're trying to make this sound like it's going to be a blowout or anything. I mean, Salado's one loss was by 1 point in overtime this year. So, I mean, the Eagles are disciplined. They're a very good team. Just the fact of the matter is that they're going up against a team that's been in this position over and over again.
I think, former LSU coach Les Miles will remind you that Salado is undefeated in regulation this year.
Does that get them into the college football playoff?
Oh, it could. In this year, it definitely could. But we're talking about Salado does have the ability to play keep away from Western Stark if their plays
That's the
work.
other side of what Marcus was saying.
I mean, literally, like they could get the ball first in this game and they could possess it for 7 or 8 minutes, and you never know if the other team starts to get kind of antsy, like, hey, where's our turn?
Yeah.
But I was going to point out one thing about Western Stark, kind of similar to Temple's opponent last week, Port Arthur Memorial. Everyone in that region of Texas went through, Hurricane Harvey.
Right.
And you see at Western Stark only at 11-0. Well, they had 2 games canceled because of Harvey. I don't think they really got going until about mid-September.
Sure.
And a lot of devastation and destruction down in southeast Texas. And, I think Port Arthur Memorial was devastated last week to lose that game to Temple, because I kind of think that was their sort of salvation was the football season they were having. And Western Stark, 2-time defending state champion, 38-game winning streak there. You got to think that's very important to the people down there to see this thing keep going as long as possible, because I'm sure they've been dealing with tough things the entire season. Yeah. So, we'll see if that, is giving them extra motivation. But who knows? It's a hot Salado team they're running into. So we'll see how the Mustangs handle the slot T, which they might not have faced this year. You never know.
Yeah, and then speaking of those teams that went through a lot over this the summer, I believe it was, with the hurricane. I got to cover the Refugio team last week and their win over Holland, and they were carrying a Refugio strong flag out of their tunnels to start the first and the second half, and definitely it's another very rich tradition, strong powerhouse team that expects nothing but the best. But when you go through stuff like that expands beyond the scope of football and really touches a lot of people's lives, and you go through travesty like that, you kind of figure out a way to work through that, and football and just sports in general are a great way to do that. So yeah, these teams that are still in the playoffs at this point that have been through that, I mean, they've got a little extra juice, a little extra emotion. They got their communities behind them, maybe a little more so than these other programs, but they're definitely fighting to keep this season alive, because that's a big thing of what they're keeping their season alive for.
And these are kids who are doing this. I mean, that's pretty remarkable as well, pretty resilient.
Well, and also, not that it was a natural disaster, but more of a personal story with the Rockdale kid, Tyler Lemke, losing his father right before the year. I know that's been a source of motivation. And out at Rockdale, they've got the blue V, I think, that they light up out of the victory V, which is kind of a cool thing. It's similar to Temple, firing up the blue light over the stadium. I think anything you can do to have a little source of motivation is really good for high school kids, and then the community itself takes pride in those things too, because what else would we know about West Orange Stark if they didn't have a great football program? So football means a lot to smaller places. It kind of puts them on the state map, and in Texas that's a pretty big deal.
Yep. So a lot on the line this week. Some really good matchups. Just once again, Temple against number 2 Manville, 7:30 at Prairie View A&M's Panther Stadium. Salado versus number 2 West Orange Stark in Katy, and that's a 7 o'clock start. And then Rockdale against Teague, 7:30 in Waco. And then, of course, UMHB 13-0 against Brockport, 13-0 as well in the NCAA Division III semifinals. UMHB going for that, second straight national championship.
Please note the different start time.
Yeah,
this week.
2:30. Everyone gets a couple more hours of hanging out time before the game starts.
Recovering from Friday night high school football.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So that one's at Crusader Stadium in Belton. That'll be a good one to watch as well.
I think it's on ESPN3 also if you do the webcast thing.
Oh.
If you can't make it out, I think there's a little webcast.
Wow,
action going on.
ESPN3.
I think I heard that.
Yeah, I think it might have been on that website last year as well.
Big
So
time.
looking forward to all that stuff, and we'll see if we have some teams left next week. If so, we'll be back. If not, we might be back as well. We'll see. So long.